Great. Well, thanks everybody. We're going to get things rolling just a little bit here. And if you haven't heard so far, please take a stroll down to the chat and introduce yourself, share your pronouns and what lands you're calling in from, where you're joining us from today. And I'll kick us off with a couple of intros from your hosts here. My name is Jonas Banta. I'm the Anchorage community organizer. Well, I was the Anchorage community organizer. I'm actually switching to salmon organizer now, letting you guys in on a little secret. I use he, him pronouns. I'm calling in from Denina Lands here in South Anchorage, enjoying all the gorgeous fresh snow for the third time in 2 weeks. And I'll pass it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Jonas. Yeah, my name's Rachel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from Otna Lands in the valley, where we just plowed our driveway this morning, and there's already like 6 inches of snow on it, so that's cool. I'm the clean energy organizer for the Alaska Center, and very excited to talk about community solar today. And I'll give it to Louis.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Louis Flora, Government Affairs Director for the Alaska Center. Calling in from Denina and Sugpiaq lands and Homer, where it's not quite as snowy as where the other folks are. And thanks everyone for coming this evening.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm calling in today from Denina Lands, but wherever you're calling in from across the state, it's important to remember that those lands are Indigenous lands, that we need to carry that history with us. And so we want to acknowledge that through the stewardship and through the colonization of these lands, that we're fortunate to live and work here. And we want to carry that understanding with us as we talk through everything that we are today. So today we're going to be talking about community solar and what it could bring to our Alaskan communities. We're going to be going through some of the solar basics, how solar works in Alaska as it is right now, kind of the current limitations of the solar industry here, and what community solar is actually, and why we need a legislative fix to achieve it. We're going to have some time towards the end for a Q&A session with our presenters, and then we're going to also talk over some of the ways that you guys can get involved and help out with this. In the meantime, you can feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll have them all queued up for the end of the presentation. And just also want to make sure folks remember to just be good about the usual Zoom things, make sure you're muted, pay attention to that kind of stuff. So great. And with that note, I'll pass it off to Rachel.
Cool. Thanks, Jonas, for getting us here and everyone else for joining us tonight. Wanted to start the presentation off with a little bit of like solar basics, solar background. So this diagram has the components of a typical solar array that you would get installed at your home, on your roof, or on the ground. So the first thing is the solar panel. You'll see in this diagram, and then in some places throughout the presentation after this, solar being referred to as PV, and that's just photovoltaic, which is a fun way to say makes volts from the sun. So your solar panels are going to convert sunlight into DC energy, and then that energy is going to run through an inverter. This diagram has the inverter like mounted onto the side of the house. But most of our modern day panels have like small inverters. They're called microinverters that go underneath each panel. So that gets rid of the like Christmas tree effect, where if one light goes out, the whole string goes out. That used to be the case with solar panels, but with the microinverters, it allows for like one panel to be shaded while the rest of them are still producing electricity. So after it runs through your inverter, it'll be converted to AC power that your house can consume, your appliances will use, and anything that's not used is then going to flow onto the utility grid through your meter. So your meter is what's going to tell the utility company at the end of the month how much energy you have produced versus how much energy you have received from the grid. And the other part of this little diagram here is the monitor. So all of our modern day panels have very fancy high-tech monitors that you can like hook up to an app that you can get on your phone. You can get like little notifications when you're producing a certain amount of energy. It'll tell you like real time how much energy you produce, and then also give you like nice graphs of what you're producing year round and how that's going to work out with your payoff schedule for your utility bills. So lots of like very easy ways to understand what your power looks like and what you're producing. And this is the most common question that I get when I'm talking to people about solar. I've been working with like teams of people calling people and asking them about community solar, talking to people outside of REI about community solar, and this has come up so many times, why we are supporting community solar in Alaska when it's dark out. So this is a little diagram that's from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And you can see in the bottom left corner is Alaska and our photovoltaic solar resources. So you can see we are pretty purple and blue. We don't have great solar resources here. That's not something that we're trying to hide. But that compared to Germany, in the bottom right corner. Also blues, purples. Germany actually has a little bit less resources than we do. They're mostly purple. We have a little bit more blue. And we're at a similar latitude as Germany. So we get similar weather patterns, also very cold and dark there throughout the winter. But Germany is the world's 4th largest solar power producer as of 2021. And in years previous to that, it's actually been the #1 solar power producer in the world for many years. So Germany composes 10% of its annual energy production from solar alone. They've been able to do really amazing things with the small solar resources that they have available to them. And comparing that to what we have the capacity for here in Alaska and what we're doing with it. This is like a little quote from Chugach Electrics, which is the utility cooperative down here in Anchorage. They say that the energy that they sell to their members comes from primarily natural gas, hydro, and wind. So we're actually not even producing enough solar down here in Anchorage to have it listed as a power source in our utility. So we just have the ability to do so much more with the resources that we have. While they may not be great, we always have the ability to do more. And this really is the reason that solar is worth it in Alaska. So these graphs were published by the Alaska Center for Energy and Power in 2017. All the way on the left, you can see the solar potential that we have compared to other cities across the US. So Fairbanks is the absolute lowest producer out of those cities that are listed. We're all the way on the right side of that graph. But in the center, we have our electricity cost, where Fairbanks ranks 2nd highest for electricity costs throughout the US. So Alaska as a state is ranked 2nd highest, only to Hawaii, as how much we pay for our electricity here. And this graph says that we pay a little bit over 2 cents per watt. But again, this was in 2017, so that's actually gone up quite a bit since then, which allows us to get this graph on the right, which is the annual savings that can be achieved with solar. So this has us about in the middle as far as cities in the US with an annual savings of a little bit over $200, but just keep in mind that power has gone up quite a bit since then, and the cost of solar has gone down quite a bit since then. So even if we aren't producing the amount of electricity that a panel in Phoenix or LA would produce, since we're paying so much for our electricity, the cost benefit that we get is higher than a lot of those cities. And we also have some good incentives for solar here in Alaska already. So the first one is net metering. And this is the system that allows customers to receive credit for power that they've produced above their monthly consumption. So this was passed in 2009 through like a policy change. And in Alaska, we have monthly net metering. So at the end of the month, all of the electricity that you produced and consumed will be tallied and then put as a credit on your bill for whatever the utility has bought back from you. So that credit does roll over into the following months, but it's not like a hard cash. It just goes as a credit onto your utility bill. We also have the Solar Investment Tax Credit, or the Solar ITC, and that was just this summer with the Inflation Reduction Act increased to 30% and guaranteed until 2033. But the big change that we're excited about is instead of just being for residential and business solar installations, it's also now available for nonprofits and cooperatives. So that's important because in Alaska, if you live on the rail belt system or on the road system, the power that you are consuming comes from energy cooperatives. So now these cooperatives are able to take advantage of these tax credits in the new year. So what the tax credit does is allow you to claim 30% of your total solar installation cost and put it as a credit on your taxes. And I think you have 3 years to use it after you've claimed it. And then this last bullet point is kind of looking ahead to what we are going to see coming as an incentive in Alaska. But through the Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to have federal funding coming in for renewable energy rebate programs. So again, this was just passed over the summer, so we don't actually have these programs up and running quite yet. But we are hoping that sometime end of this year, maybe early next, we're going to have rebate programs where if you put any sort of renewable energy upgrades on your home, be it wind, solar, whatever you choose, you'll be able to turn those in for rebate from the federal government. So with our increasing electric prices and also the decreased cost of solar, solar demand in Alaska has been rising rapidly in the last couple of years. It's received national attention, international attention. These are some headlines that I found from different sources when I was looking up resources for this presentation. And my favorite one is investing in solar power in Alaska may be a better bet than the stock market. Granted, it was published in 2020 and the stock market was not doing wonderful things at that point. But it is still a good point to be made that no matter what happens when you invest in solar power, it is going to pay itself off. We have the evidence to back that up now. And this is just a graph that shows the net metering capacity in Alaska. This is also from the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. Net metering capacity is essentially just like the amount of solar that has been installed in Alaska in the last 10 years. And you can see right about 2018, we've seen very dramatic increases in the amount of solar that's being installed in Alaska. So there's a demand and it's growing really rapidly. Something that happened in 2018 is Solarize program started. So Solarize is a program that we facilitate in partnership with a lot of other organizations across the state, but it started in Airport Heights in 2018 and has now grown throughout Anchorage and Fairbanks, and we just had our first program in the Mat-Su. The program's goal is to make solar more affordable and accessible to home and business owners. So through this program, we've done over 500 rooftop installations. We've gotten over 1.5 kilowatts of solar installed. So it has been a really successful program and has definitely increased the amount of solar that we have here in Alaska and increased people's awareness of solar as an option. But we really want to be able to do more to make it accessible for folks. So what Solarize does is provide a small discount for people to participate in the program and also make consumable, understandable information from installers because getting solar is very complicated and confusing. So we've been able to make these small achievements while doing those things, but there are a lot of barriers that people are still experiencing that we need to find ways to get around. So these are some of the accessibility limitations that we've been experiencing trying to get people solar. So the first one that we cannot find a way around right now is the high upfront cost of solar. So even with the small discount that you get from the Solarize program and those investment tax credits and incentives, we're seeing folks having to pay anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 for an average home solar array, which is something that the majority of us cannot afford on a regular year. There are some financing options available, but getting financing for solar is a bit more difficult than it is to finance a car loan or something like that. There are few very specific loans that you can qualify for, and they are becoming more available, but it's still just a huge barrier that we are having a problem trying to accomplish. And it's also only available to homeowners and specifically homeowners with access to adequate sunlight. So I rent a small cabin in the middle of the woods. The sun has not actually touched my yard in quite a few weeks now. And while my utility bill is in my name, I don't own my house. So I do not have the ability to participate in solar right now, both because I don't have good sunlight access and because I don't own my home. And that's a lot of folks that are living in Alaska. And this applies to apartment owners and condo owners as well. Even if your utility bill is in your name, if you don't own your roof, then you don't have the ability to get solar. And we believe that affordable renewable energy is essential for a just transition. We want Alaska to be at 100% renewable energy, but we also want the benefits to cleaner and cheaper energy to be available to all Alaskans. So that is why we are excited about community solar. And I'll give it to Louis to talk about what community solar will bring.
Well, thank you very much. That was great. Great teeing up of the information. And so I think we need to start with the basic difference, and Rachel discussed it there, but the main difference is the net metering that so many Alaskans on the rail belt have taken advantage of is required to be on site. And there's a specific part of the regulation that requires that. And so that is what allows for all the homes you see with solar panels on them, and a lack of big solar arrays that are owned by a community. And so a community solar system is different in that it does not have to be on site. And also, as Rachel said, you don't have to foot the bill for the full upfront cost. You invest in the solar array that would be put up by the utility or by a independent power producer or a group of communities coming together, community members coming together, pooling their assets to put up the solar farm or the community solar array. And so that's the main difference. And next slide, please. And we're really interested in it because it democratizes the energy transition that we're undergoing nationwide and in Alaska. Last year, there was a piece of legislation that Governor Dunleavy put forward that mandated that rail belt utilities hit 80% renewable energy by 2040. And a number of utilities, I'm in the Homer Electric Association utility area, and we have a 50% renewable energy by 2025 goal. So the energy transition is happening, and Alaskans that net meter are participating in that, though it's a smaller degree than large utility grades renewable energy. But we want to allow all Alaskans to participate in this transition. And there's more benefits than just the, just having the thrill of seeing that you're generating electricity. It's also a community building when you can have a bunch of community members working together to invest in a solar array. It really helps democratize and build community. So next slide. As you can see here, community solar is very common in the United States and in the world, but across the nation, there are 39 states and the Washington, D.C. That have community solar projects running. There are currently 21 states with legislation that explicitly supports community solar. Bringing these projects to Alaska would be catching us up in a market that's been rapidly growing in the US over the last 20 years. And this graph that we have up here is from a study done by the Renewable Energy Lab in 2020, and it shows the huge increase in the amount of community solar projects that have been installed over the last 5 years. So we believe there's no reason that Alaska should not join these states, considering the slides of the cost benefit that Rachel showed on the benefit of the Fairbanks case study. Solar works in Alaska, and we should definitely be participating in that. Slide 16, please. So there's jobs in the solar industry as well as a huge argument for why we're working to increase solar in Alaska. Jobs in the solar industry have doubled in the last decade. And today in the US employs over twice as many people as in the coal industry. And this graph is from a National Solar Jobs Census, which was in 2022. It shows the increase in solar capacity in the blue bars, as well as the increase in jobs in the yellow line. And while the growth is still impressive on its own, things are changing rapidly this year. And the Biden administration's 30 by 30 initiative, it is expected the solar industry will need to grow by 800,000 individuals by 2030 in order to accomplish the goals of the Biden administration's climate package. So bringing jobs to Alaska is one of the key drivers in our push for more solar as well. So we will slide 17. So why legislation? And we believe the best way for a clean guideline for how we go about community solar is through legislation. There's been efforts by different utilities in the past. The Chugach Electric Association has attempted to put a community solar program together, and the Homer Electric Association has also tried to move forward with the community solar, and both of those either fell short by the board of directors voting it down by a slim majority, or the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, which is the governing commission that oversees all the operations of the regulated utilities, has shut down projects. And so what we're aiming to do by moving forward with community solar legislation is to give guidelines to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, and essentially requiring that they allow community solar, and then also giving guidelines for how they value the energy, how customers that invest in the community solar get credited back, and who can participate in the program. Next slide. So these are the key changes that we're looking at with legislation moving forward into the session coming up in 2023. The legislation that we're currently in draft form would authorize virtual net metering, and that would allow, as we talked about earlier, someone not having to have the solar panel on your premise, on your property. And so that would allow folks that either don't own the property or don't have property that can produce electricity adequately, or don't have a roof that can support renewable energy installations, and there's a whole host of reasons why you wouldn't be able to have solar panels on your house or property. And so this would allow virtual net metering to allow you to invest and participate. Another facet of the legislation is going to just simply be permitting the resale of electricity, as is done in the net energy metering statute or regulation with the credit for your excess electricity. There has to be guidelines on how the utilities handle that resale of the excess electricity generated by the community solar, and then ensuring a fair pay mechanism, just making sure that folks are credited back when they've invested in this solar program, that there's a adequate route for them to be compensated for their investment, especially in the mega producing months of March through October, when there's just significant amounts of generation in Alaska. And then another facet is open access and ownership, just to clarify how the Regulatory Commission deals with who can participate in community solar, and be that the community groups or nonprofit entities or for-profit entities, and just clarifying those standards. And then finally, labor and installation standards, to ensure that as much as possible we can ensure that solar arrays and community solar are combined with prevailing wage or union jobs, high-paying union jobs. And then installation standards are, of course, required to ensure the safety of workers and that are dealing with the utility workers and others that would be dealing with the community solar panels. Next slide. And so we really appreciate everyone's participation this evening, and this, we believe this is kind of a key area for us to move forward on as far as democratizing the energy transition. And we believe that community solar could play a huge role in the transition to a renewable future. And not only will this produce more renewable energy, it will also create community participation in our energy systems. Community solar can become community wind farms, community energy storage facilities like batteries. It's a small legislative change that would open the door for a huge whole new world of possibilities to add renewable energy to our grid, all controlled and created by community members themselves. And that could be you. Thank you. I'll hand it back to Rachel.
Yay, great. Thanks, Louis, for sharing those last slides. And we want to have time for questions. And I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that this is a little less. There. Okay. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or we can unmute. We have a pretty small group here tonight. So if you want to just like talk, questions about the legislation or how it'll be adapted, who can participate, anything like that.
I have a question. So if I'm a renter in Fairbanks and then I move to Juneau and I'm a renter there, I assume that the legislation that's being written you'd have parity between different electric associations in the state? I mean, or, you know, interoperability?
So the tricky part about it is that you would have to be able to stay within your electric provider's region. So the legislation that we introduced, are planning to introduce, is modeled off of the legislation in Minnesota. And the way that they have their setup right now is that if you're moving within your utilities region, then you can keep your share, like you can keep on your bill, it doesn't matter. But if you move outside of that region, then you have to sell your share back to the utility.
So are you encouraging us to like write to our legislators, or is the legislation already proposed, or?
Yeah, so I guess like after the Q&A thing, I was going to talk about like some of the things that we have planned for actions that folks can take, but we want people to write to legislators and call their legislators. We've been talking to community members. If people want to like come and help out with that, call people, talk to people on the streets. But we do not have the legislation introduced yet because legislative session hasn't started. So maybe Louis, if you want to talk a little bit more about timeline things.
Yeah, I think the develop talking points and writing letters to your legislator generally supporting the concept would be helpful. And the legislature is scheduled to start on the 16th of January, I believe. And we would have the legislation would likely be introduced in that first or second week of January. And right now we're just working to finalize some of the initial questions, but really when you introduce a piece of legislation, that's just the starting point. So it doesn't, it could change drastically based on legislators' comments, citizen comments, input from the utilities, other members of the public, NGO groups. And so that's the beauty of the legislative process. So we're just trying to get all the folks here in on kind of the ground floor as we start the discussion in the legislature. And so we can all move forward as a team in our advocacy.
Is there an HB number or an S number to refer to, or just that we support community solar from the RCA?
Oh yeah, I apologize. I didn't catch that part of the question. All the legislation in 2022 that had a number died at the end of the regular second session in May of this year. And so there won't be any HB numbers until they meet, until the legislature convenes and they are able to read legislation across the House floor. And that's when it gets a number. So we won't see HB or SB numbers until House bill or Senate bill numbers until mid-January. So yeah, generally supporting community solar. But I defer to the organizers on this call.
Yeah, I have like a little link that I'll send out I can send it out right now. But if you're interested in getting involved, you can sign up for any of these things. But also if you just put on there that like you're interested in staying informed, we can make sure that we alert you when we do have those things, the Senate bill numbers or the House bill numbers. Oh, good. Jonas put it in there. Thanks, Jonas. So if you want to stay like informed on this, we'll have it in probably like our end of the week blogs and things like that, but explicitly like we'll give updates on like when people can testify at hearings and what the important like the key legislators that can make decisions on the bill are and things like that. And then it looks like there's a question in the chat. Where do you envision the arrays going, on people's houses, or rather a big array on some kind of public property? So the glory of where we're at with this process right now is that a lot of, well, I guess like the great thing and the downfall to answering questions about it is that a lot of it is kind of up in the air, and we're hoping to see like a variety of different options of ways people can use community solar. So the projects that have been proposed in Alaska in the past have been like a large field of land that's sort of like outside of town, and they can put up a large array on that, and then it can, you know, virtual net meter back to folks in the city. But it's also a potential that if like there are a bunch of people in an apartment building that want to get solar, then maybe they could put a large array on the top of their apartment complex. Or we could use the top of a like parking structure in Anchorage and turn it into a solar array. There are lots of, tennis courts. I originally was saying that we should turn all of the golf courses in Anchorage into solar arrays. There's a lot of options for where these things can go. So we're just excited about getting it passed so that we can start to have those conversations.
I see Bennett here.
Hey, thanks y'all for the great presentation. I was wondering what community solar investments end up looking like for individuals. Like, do you end up saving money down the road? Are you making money? Are you breaking even? What does that look like?
So last night at the Chugach Electric Association board meeting, they actually presented some studies that they've been doing about community solar over the last year, because I think Louis mentioned Chugach had like tried to get community solar in the past, but was shut down. So they've been doing some work to try and figure out how to make it more feasible. And they have found that with the prices of electricity increasing, people will see a net savings in investing in community solar. When they initially made their project, I think it was in 2018, they weren't sure if people were going to see a net savings, but since then power has gone up so much that people are now guaranteed to see a savings in their bill when they invest in community solar.
Great, thanks.
So the cost would be like 10 grand per person for the community solar thing? Or is that just to like do the individual on your own house?
That was the cost of the individual on your own house. So community solar would be like a share that you purchase of a solar array. The project that Chugach just is like talking about trying to propose in the next couple years has people, you can either do like a initial buy-in and upfront cost, or you can pay monthly on your bill. But the initial buy-in cost was like $1,000. So that would be the difference of getting community solar versus solar just on your own home, is it would maybe be like $1,000 to $3,000 instead if you want to pay it all up front in the beginning, or you could just pay like a small monthly bill throughout the cycle, and you might not need to pay upfront at all. It really just depends on how the utilities adopt the legislation.
So Chugach are they talking about doing it community wide? Or, taking different areas of town to start? Or we won't know that until the legislation gets passed, right?
Yeah, that's another thing that we're just not sure of until it passes. But that's why having conversations like this are important, so people can talk about like questions that they have, and we can make sure that the legislation does like include things that people care about. And a big I guess, like decision maker on that front of like who gets to be in the first projects and where they're located and stuff like that is actually the utility board members at our local utility cooperatives. So Anchorage is Chugach Electric, and they have 6 board members that sort of like lead the board on making decisions around things like this. So if folks are very passionate about making sure that this is done in a good way, those are great people to talk to and make sure that they know what you want and how you want it to be done, so that it goes in a way that we all like.
And Rachel, I might be misremembering or thinking of a different conversation, but I thought there was a generation facility or some station where that owned by Chugach where they were thinking of putting this first community solar array.
Yeah, let me go look at my notes really quick. I wrote down the name of it, but the Rutherford substation. They have like a 5-acre plot there that they're looking at for putting a community solar array on. So for Anchorage folks, if you know where there's at.
Since there's downtime, I would just add that the Inflation Reduction Act provided a lot of incentives and benefits for community solar, and it also has provisions on underserved communities or disadvantaged communities, and it explicitly listed in some of the rulemaking tribal entities or tribal governments as part of those that would be set aside for specific allocations of money. So that beyond rail belt applications, there's likely going to be large opportunities for tribal governments and rural Alaska to participate in community solar as well. So that's just something to throw out there. And the Alaska Center will definitely be tracking all these and working on a number of different fronts.
I'm gonna answer this question that's in the chat really quick. For how big of an array they could put on a 5-acre plot, I don't actually know how many people could be served from that. Their initial presentation had a 500 kilowatt panel setup, which is I guess like what we usually see folks getting on rooftop through Solarize is anywhere from like 3 to 5 kilowatts. So that would serve, up to like 100 people for their initial like project idea. And then Bennett, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, in other states with community solar, what types of organizations are typically managing the projects? Is it mostly utilities that manage the projects and then go to ratepayers for financing? And what would that look like in Alaska? Would it mostly be co-ops?
So this is another thing where like it really is going to depend on how things go throughout the legislation, but what we're hoping to see is a variety of people being able to own them. So if like a community wants to come together and everyone pitches in like a certain amount of money, then they can put their own panel array up, or the utility can provide some, like Chugach is proposing right now. Like I said, it's based on the legislation in Minnesota, and that's like the system that they have. So they do have some of their panels are owned by like a third party investing company where they buy and put up the panels and then allow people to invest in them afterwards. Some of them are owned by the utilities where people can like buy in and out of their shares, and some are owned by community members. Like a school can put up an array if they have space for that, and then like sell it back to community members, things like that. So it depends on how it goes, but we're hoping for anyone to be able to do it.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm just gonna put this link to like participate in our program back into the chat that Jonas had sent out earlier, but we are hoping to, well, not hoping to have, we're going to have a lot of opportunities for folks to participate in community solar like activism in the coming year. So some of the things we've been doing so far are phone banking and street canvassing, talking to people, asking them to support it, asking them to like put their name on a list of folks who would take action once the legislation is introduced. But once it's actually introduced, we can do a lot more. So we can call our legislators, we can send them letters, we can write op-eds and letter to the editors in the newspapers, take all kinds of action. So if folks are interested in participating in that, or just want to generally like stay informed and be available to testify at hearings and know what the hearings are and stuff like that, you can sign up at that link in the chat.
Great. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Great big thank you to Rachel and Louis for doing a great job presenting all the information to us. I want to run off and end things prematurely, but unless there are any other questions, I think that we're at a pretty good closing point. Anything else, Rachel?
No, thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, if you have any questions, I can put my email into the chat like later, but thanks for coming.